Hi, I'm Erika Lindensmith, and I'm a conservator at the University of California. In this small pile of books, I see the march of time. But first, we should define a book. A book has an anatomy and there are names for each part. There's the head, the tail, the spine, the foredge, the cover or case, the text block, which is the inside, and the joint on the outside, and the end papers on the inside. All of these are examples of Western bindings and texts which happen to come from the Bancroft Library. On the most fundamental level, we read a book by reading the text. However, there are other aspects of a book that indicate how a book was made, distributed, and used. All of these aspects inform what the reader takes in, their reading experience, and may influence their research. Now, the structure of the book has changed over time. These changes are a reflection of increased literacy and, in turn, demand for books, resulting in changes in book manufacturing. Although these are all collections of printed text, their structures are significantly different. This tiny book from 1686 France has raised cords, where gatherings of folded pages are sewn through the fold and around raised cords. You can see the cords here on the spine beneath the leather. There's gold tooling on the spine, on the cover, and on the edges of the board. And there's a gold tooled label. I can tell that this was considered an important book because they even put gold on all three sides of the text block. And you can even see a little bit of marbling underneath the gold right there. This is a book of saints for every day of the year. It is so small, it would be easy for a person to carry it around with them. Many texts of this size were often owned by someone to carry with them and quietly consult on their own. The next book is a paper case binding made in Italy in 1673. The cover is made from a heavyweight paper and the text block is sewn on two cords that are laced through the covers, and the end papers are glued to the covers. With this book, we can see the end papers were made from waste paper, and there's printing on the other side of the pasted down end sheet. Some books get bound multiple times, but we can tell this is the first binding this book ever had. The paper case is temporary. Books like this were meant to be bound later, usually in leather. And we can compare this to the first binding. In comparison, this book may have originally been purchased in sheets or in a paper case. And this small volume was likely bound in leather by its owner and reflects the taste and status of that owner. The pages of this text block are untrimmed. There's a rough decal edge, you can see there. And the pages are all different sizes because it was printed on large sheets of paper that were then folded down to the size of the book. Notice how the columns of text from page to page all line up, whereas the edges of the paper do not. You can see there it's shorter. Here you get a bigger paper, but the text is all lined up. In this way, the head, tail, and foredge can all be trimmed later without losing text. Note that this text block was trimmed so much that some of the text was actually trimmed off. You can see in there. In the upper right corner, you can see a little bit trimmed. The next book is an 1850 cookbook from Mexico bound in quarter sheep, which means there's sheepskin on the spine and part of the covers. I can tell it's sheepskin because of the way that the top layer of the leather has delaminated here. The edges of the text block have been trimmed and are decorated with speckled blue paint. On the inside front cover, there's what appears to be a bookseller's note, which makes me think that it was the bookseller who had it bound like this, as opposed to the owner binding it after purchase like the small leather book. And this book is small. It fits right in your hand and in your apron pocket. And then we move to the 20th century. Reading is more common, printing is faster, and books have to be bound quickly and cheaply. Efficiencies are found in the bookmaking process. In this case binding was from 1940, which the cover was constructed and decorated and then attached to a machine-sewn text block. Cloth as a covering material is much less expensive and faster than preparing leather. A decoration can be stamped in blind or color on the spine and front cover. So you can see a little bit here, you can see the embossing. And you can see the printing on the spine. And here we have a paperback from 1958, which seems very familiar to us until you open the front cover and find it has been stapled instead of sewn or glued as we most often see today. The staples are called wire stitching. This book we see is an early version of the mass market paperbacks, which represents the ultimate in cheaply made binding. Mass market paperbacks only have glue attaching the pages, and the paper is very poor quality and the size is small in order to save materials. So mass market would just be glued together at the spine. These books here in this stack represent the shift toward widespread reading and sharing of knowledge. And now, in the modern era, people are challenging the idea of what a book is or represents and takes us to the concept of artist books. Artist books can be read as something other than a classic book that is meant to be read. They can be something that questions its own structure, use, and meaning. Artist book can be read, but not in the same way as a typical bound volume. Not only does it not look like a book, but the flow for how one moves through it is entirely different. The goals are not necessarily clear, and how one approaches reading an artist book will vary widely from one book to another. Books like these are rare and from special collections. For many reasons, they are important, in no small part because their variety and structure functions as evidence of changes in manufacturing and in dissemination of printed knowledge. These are interesting to me because there are so many different ways you can put pieces of paper together to function as a book, to be read, to impart knowledge, and how the changes in book production also reflect changes in society.